Welcome to our deep dive. In a Morgan Housel's Same as Ever, we're using the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. And today we're going to explore this really interesting idea, how despite all the rapid changes all around us, human behavior remains remarkably consistent.
It does. Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
We feel this whirlwind of progress, especially, I think, someone like you who's always learning and adapting. But Housel argues that understanding these enduring patterns, it's key to making better decisions, spotting those hidden opportunities, and even feeling maybe a little bit calmer in the middle of all the chaos.
That's a good point. And Anil Nathu's 1 Hour Guide. This thing provides a brilliant shortcut to Housel's wisdom, gives us those core insights without having to drown in all the details. So let's dive right in. The guide starts strong with what Nathu calls human nature's greatest hits.
Yeah, it's all about those timeless drivers of human behavior, fear, greed, the need to belong. These aren't just theoretical concepts. They've shaped history and they
Yeah.
continue to influence our decisions every day.
So if we understand these primal forces, can we predict how people will react, let's say to a new product launch or even a shifting political landscape?
I think it's less about precise prediction and more about understanding those underlying motivations. Take the fear of missing out, for example. It's why people chase those hot stocks, join the latest trends, even when it goes against their better judgment. Recognizing this pattern can help you anticipate market bubbles, consumer behavior shifts, even how information spreads online.
It makes sense. Instead of viewing these emotions as irrational, we can see them as consistent forces shaping human actions throughout history. But the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu also brings up how we often misjudge, risk fixating on the wrong things. So what did Housel have to say about that?
Well, he dives deep into the concept of unknown unknowns. Those risks we're completely blind to, because they're just outside our current frame of reference. Think of companies like Blockbuster ignoring the rise of streaming services. They were so focused on their existing competitors that they missed that bigger threat.
It's a sobering reminder that how we perceive the world just shapes every decision that we make. And even with all the information at our fingertips, these blind spots can still lead us astray.
This section of the guide really encourages us to examine our own assumptions. What are WE taking for granted? What potential disruptions are we overlooking in our own fields? Because as Housel points out, sometimes the biggest risks are the ones we don't even know exist.
Okay, so recognizing those blind spots, crucial. But the guide also touches on something seemingly less serious, but equally important, the power of stories. Why does storytelling trump data when it comes to persuading people?
Because data, while important, often lacks the emotional punch of a well-told story. Stories resonate with us. They create empathy, stir emotions, and make information memorable. Think about how leaders inspire teams, marketers build brands, or even how we connect with friends and family. It's all about the narrative we weave.
It's true. I'm a sucker for a good story, even if I know the facts might be different. This one time I was listening to a pitch for this, can't miss investment. I think I was so charismatic, painting this picture of early retirement and financial freedom. I almost went all in.
Oh, wow. So what stopped you?
Luckily, I took a step back, looked at the actual numbers, and realized the guaranteed returns were built on some pretty shaky assumptions. It was a close call, though. That story almost got me.
See, that's exactly why Housel emphasizes the need to balance that emotional pull of a narrative with critical thinking. The 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu constantly stresses this point. We can appreciate the power of stories, but we also need to be discerning consumers of information, asking ourselves, who's telling the story? What's their agenda? And do the facts actually support it?
So it's about being captivated by the narrative, but also keeping a level head, questioning the numbers behind the claims. I'm starting to see why this book is so relevant for someone like our listener, someone who's always eager to learn and adapt.
Absolutely. Because the world is full of compelling stories, and it's the discerning mind that can separate the truth from the hype. Now let's shift gears and talk about another key takeaway from the 1 Hour Guide, one that really resonates with your love for efficient learning.
I'm sensing this has something to do with compounding, right? That idea that small actions done consistently over time can lead to remarkable results.
You hit the nail on the head. Housel argues that this principle applies not just to finances, but to every area of life, from learning a new skill to building relationships to growing a business.
It reminds me of something I read about bamboo. It spends years underground, seemingly doing nothing, then suddenly shoots up dozens of feet in a short span. It's all about that slow, unseen growth beneath the surface.
Exactly. And that's where patience becomes a superpower. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, the ability to play the long game, to trust that process of consistent effort is incredibly valuable. The 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathur does a fantastic job of summarizing the essence of Housel's argument on this. It's not about finding shortcuts or chasing quick wins, but about embracing the power of steady, sustained action.
That resonates deeply with me, especially when I think about how often I get caught up in that frenzy of hustle culture, always pushing for more, faster, bigger. Sometimes I lose sight of the long-term vision.
And that's precisely why understanding this principle is so important. It helps us prioritize those small, consistent actions that over time contribute to meaningful results. So let's pause here for a moment and think about this. What's one small action you could commit to doing consistently that would move you closer to a goal you have?
Hmm. I've been wanting to write a short story, but I keep getting stuck on finding the perfect idea. Maybe I could just commit to writing 1 page a day, even if it's terrible.
Mm.
Over time, that could add up to a finished story, right?
That's a great example. And who knows, those daily pages might spark unexpected inspiration and lead to something even better than you imagined. Now, building on this idea of managing expectations, the 1 Hour Guide brings up another important concept: finding the balance between optimism and realism. What did Housel have to say about that?
Okay, so not blind optimism, but also not doom scrolling all day, right? Where's that sweet spot, and how does the 1 Hour Guide help us find it?
Housel's argument is to approach life with a sense of hope while also being prepared for challenges. The 1 Hour Guide highlights some practical tips on how to do this, from building emergency funds to diversifying investments to simply having backup plans.
That seems simple enough, but honestly, it's tough to maintain that balance, especially when emotions run high. Like when the markets are crashing or your project hits a major setback, it's easy to either panic or become overly optimistic to the point of ignoring reality.
That's where self-awareness comes in. Recognizing our own tendencies, whether we lean towards excessive optimism or pessimism, can help us course correct. If you're prone to over-optimism, make it a habit to play devil's advocate with your own plans.
And if you tend to worry too much, maybe force yourself to list a few things you're grateful for each day to shift perspective.
Exactly. It's about finding that equilibrium. Being prepared for challenges without being paralyzed by fear, and being hopeful for the future without being naive.
Such great advice. It's a concept I'll definitely be reflecting on. But before we go too deep, let's recap what we've covered in this first part of our deep dive.
We've explored the power of understanding human nature and those consistent patterns that drive our behavior. We've talked about recognizing our blind spots when it comes to risk, the importance of balancing the emotional pull of stories with critical thinking, and the magic of compounding. How those small, consistent actions embraced with patience can lead to significant results.
And we've touched on the importance of finding that sweet spot between optimism and realism, preparing for potential challenges without losing sight of the hopeful possibilities.
All fantastic insights from the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu, giving us a taste of the wisdom Housel shares in Same as Ever, but there's still more to unpack, so stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive. We'll delve deeper into some of these concepts and explore even more strategies for navigating a world that feels like it's constantly changing, even when, as Housel reminds us, so much remains the same. Welcome back to our deep dive into Morgan Housel's Same as Ever. We're still using Anil Nathu's insightful 1 Hour Guide, and we've already explored those timeless patterns of human behavior and how they influence our decisions.
Yeah, and I'm still thinking about those unknown unknowns. Makes you realize how much we don't know, even when we think we've got things figured out. But moving on, the guide highlights another important concept: managing expectations. It's not just about setting realistic goals, is it? Anil Nathu points to something like deeper.
Yeah, exactly. Housel argues that a lot of our happiness and even our success in, any endeavor hinges on how well we manage those expectations we set for ourselves. When they're out of sync with reality, we're almost guaranteed to be disappointed.
It's like when you build up this huge anticipation for a movie. Everyone's raving about it.
Yeah.
Even if it's a decent film, like objectively, you're likely to feel let down because it just didn't live up to the hype.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, when we keep expectations in check, even small wins feel like significant victories. This principle applies to everything, from personal projects to launching a new business.
So how can someone listening, say a team leader or someone starting a creative project, practically apply this idea of managing expectations?
Well, it's about setting clear, attainable goals, but also communicating effectively with everyone involved, whether it's your team, clients, or even yourself. Overpromising and underdelivering is a recipe for disaster. It erodes trust and can really damage morale.
And this is probably even more crucial in today's world, where we're bombarded with those curated highlight reels of success on social media. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to those unrealistic portrayals of achievement.
Absolutely. And the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu addresses this directly. He highlights how Housel warns against falling for that easy button mentality, that idea that there's always a shortcut or a hack to success.
Ugh, the constant search for the hack. But as Housel reminds us, anything truly worthwhile takes consistent effort, right? No magic bullet.
Exactly. And this ties into another point Anil Nathu emphasizes. Housel's focus on the importance of long-term thinking. It's about understanding that real progress, whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal growth, it rarely happens overnight.
It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. You've got to put in the work and NLW for those future benefits.
Such a powerful image. And that's what Housel gets at, the ability to delay gratification, to resist the allure of instant results. That's a superpower in today's world. It helps us avoid those impulsive decisions driven by short-term thinking.
Like panic selling investments when the market dips, or abandoning a project that isn't an overnight success without giving it the time it needs to develop.
Precisely. So how do we cultivate this long-term thinking mindset? Because it's tough to stay focused when the world is constantly demanding our attention.
Yeah, feels like we're always fighting that urge to jump from one shiny thing to the next.
Yeah.
How do we resist that pull?
It starts with defining those long-term goals that truly matter to you. Then break those goals down into smaller, manageable steps you can celebrate along the way.
So instead of getting overwhelmed by that distant finish line, you're creating mini milestones to keep you motivated.
Exactly. And it's here that the balance between optimism and realism, which we talked about earlier, comes into play again. You have to believe in that long-term vision while being prepared for setbacks and challenges along the way.
It's like planning a road trip. You're excited about reaching your destination, but you also pack extra supplies and map out alternate routes, knowing there might be unexpected detours.
I love that analogy. Now let's switch gears a bit. Anil Nathu brings up a point from Housel that I think will resonate with you. The importance of experience.
I'm all about soaking up knowledge, but you're saying there's something more to it than that.
Housel argues that while reading and studying are essential, there's a depth of understanding that only comes from lived experience.
Like, I could read all about riding a bike, but until I actually hop on and wobble around, I don't truly know what it takes.
Exactly. And this applies to business leadership, creative endeavors, everything. The 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu highlights a point from Housel. Those entrepreneurs who've been through the trenches, who've made mistakes and learned from them, they have a different kind of wisdom than those who've only studied theory.
So it's not about discounting knowledge, but acknowledging that it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's about valuing both the theoretical AA, the practical, the head knowledge, A&D, the lessons learned through trial and error.
I'm starting to see how all these concepts tie together. The constant patterns of human behavior, the importance of long-term thinking, the value of experience. It all feeds into making better decisions and navigating a complex world.
That's the beauty of Housel's work. He weaves together these seemingly disparate ideas into a cohesive framework for understanding not just the world around us, but ourselves.
Okay, but let's be honest. Sometimes it feels like no matter how much knowledge we gain, how well we plan, life still throws us curveballs. How do we deal with that feeling of being overwhelmed by the pressure to perform, to always be on?
That's a fantastic question, and thankfully Anil Nathu addresses this in the guide. He highlights how Housel argues that sometimes trying too hard can actually be counterproductive.
Wait, isn't hard work always a good thing?
I-
That's what we're constantly told, right?
Well, there's a difference between dedicated effort and pushing ourselves to the point of burnout. Housel suggests there's a point of diminishing returns, where that extra effort actually leads to less effective results.
I'm starting to see what he means. It's like when you're working on a creative project and you hit that wall. The more you force it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to step away, recharge, and come back with a fresh perspective.
Exactly. And this applies to leadership, too. Sometimes the best thing a leader can do is step back, trust their team, and give them the space to figure things out without micromanaging every detail.
So it's about recognizing when to push and when to let go, knowing when to trust the process even when it feels counterintuitive.
And this leads us to another important point Anil Nathu highlights in the 1 Hour Guide. The role of incentives. Housel argues that incentives are incredibly powerful, but they need to be aligned with the right goals.
Because if you're incentivizing the wrong behavior, you're going to get the wrong results, even if everyone is working their tails off.
Precisely. And it's surprisingly easy to fall into the trap of focusing on the wrong metrics, especially in today's data-driven world. We get so fixated on tracking numbers and benchmarks without stopping to ask if those numbers actually reflect what truly matters.
Like, if you're a social media influencer focused solely on gaining followers, you might end up sacrificing authenticity and quality content in the pursuit of those vanity metrics.
A perfect example. House's point is that we need to be mindful of the incentives we're creating, both for ourselves and for others.
Because those incentives will ultimately shape our behavior whether we're consciously aware of it or not. Now, I'm sensing this all ties into something we discussed earlier, long-term thinking. Is there a connection there?
You're spot on. Anil Nasu brings up a fascinating concept from Housel's book that ties all of this together beautifully. Time horizons, Housel argues that the time horizon we're operating from influences every decision we make. If we're focused on the short term, we're more likely to make impulsive choices that don't serve our long-term goals.
Like grabbing that extra donut even though we know it won't help us reach our fitness goals. Or investing in a get-rich-quick scheme that ends up being a scam.
Exactly. But when we operate from a long-term perspective, we make choices that are aligned with our values and aspirations.
Like saving for retirement even though it feels like a lifetime away. Or building a business focused on sustainability, even if it means sacrificing some short-term profits.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that those seemingly small, everyday choices accumulate over time and ultimately determine the trajectory of our lives.
So how do we shift our time horizons? It's tough to think about the future when you're drowning in the demands of the present.
Well, it starts with defining those long-term goals, as we talked about before, but it also requires a conscious shift in mindset. We have to train ourselves to value delayed gratification over instant rewards.
And I bet that takes practice, right? Our brains are wired for those quick hits of dopamine, those instant rewards.
Absolutely. But with effort and awareness, we can rewire our thinking and align our actions with our long-term goals.
It's almost like becoming more intentional about how we spend not just our money, but our time and energy, investing those resources in activities and pursuits that align with our future selves, not just the right now self.
That's a fantastic way to put it, and it perfectly encapsulates what Housel is advocating for in Same as Ever. It's about recognizing that despite the allure of the quick fix, the easy button, true fulfillment and lasting success come from playing the long game.
We've covered a lot of ground in this section. Managing expectations, the power of long-term thinking, the importance of experience, the dangers of trying too hard aligning incentives, and the impact of our time horizons.
And all of this connects back to Housel's central argument. By understanding those enduring patterns of human behavior, we can make smarter decisions, navigate uncertainty, and create a more fulfilling life, both personally and professionally.
So many valuable insights, just from the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. But before we get carried away, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Same as Ever and explore some key takeaways for our listener to ponder. Welcome back to, the final part of our deep dive into Morgan Housel's Same as Ever. We're still using Anil Nathu's excellent 1-Hour Guide. It's been quite a journey exploring these, timeless human patterns, the pitfalls of risk perception, and the power of playing that long game.
Yeah, it really has. It's amazing how Housel manages to be both insightful and reassuring. He doesn't shy away from the, complexities and uncertainties of the world, but then offers this grounding perspective by just pointing to those enduring aspects of human nature.
He's saying, look, things might feel chaotic, but don't worry. Humans have always been this way.
Yeah.
We've faced challenges, made mistakes, learned, adapted, and ultimately we've figured things out. We'll do it again.
Exactly. And that message is incredibly powerful, especially for anyone feeling overwhelmed by the constant change and information overload we face today. It's a reminder that while the specifics might differ, the underlying patterns of human behavior remain remarkably consistent.
So for our listener, who has now absorbed all this wisdom from the 1-Hour Guide on Same as Ever, what are some actionable takeaways they can apply to their own lives? Let's get practical.
Well, I think it starts with that self-awareness we've touched on throughout this, whole deep dive. Recognizing your own biases, your time horizons, the stories you tell yourself. Anil Nathu emphasizes this throughout the guide, highlighting how Housel consistently returns to the importance of understanding ourselves.
Because once you understand those patterns, you can start making more conscious choices.
Yeah.
It's like becoming the architect of your own mind instead of just reacting to whatever thoughts and emotions just pop up.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And speaking of thoughts, the guide also emphasizes the importance of questioning our assumptions. We talked about this in the context of risk, but it goes far beyond that.
Right. It's about challenging those truths we hold dear, especially in a world where information and misinformation spread so rapidly. Like that saying, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see.
we need to flex that critical thinking muscle constantly.
Absolutely. And that includes questioning the assumptions behind the stories we're told, the data we're presented with, even the goals we're pursuing. Are they truly our own? Do they align with our values? Are we chasing someone else's definition of success?
So it's not about becoming cynical or distrusting everything, but about cultivating that healthy skepticism, asking, who benefits from me believing this? What's the other side of the story? And is this really what I want, or am I being influenced by external pressures?
Those are excellent questions to ask yourself regularly. It's about being a discerning consumer of information and a conscious architect of your own life.
Yeah.
Now, circling back to the book's title, same as ever. The One-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu highlights how Housel leaves us with a sense of both caution and optimism.
Okay, how does that work? Caution and optimism simultaneously. It seems like those two are kind of at odds with each other.
Well, it's about recognizing that human nature, with all its flaws and potential, is a constant. We're capable of incredible things, but we're also prone to the same mistakes, the same short-sightedness, the same fears that have plagued us for centuries.
So it's not about predicting whether the future will be good or bad, but about understanding the forces that will shape it, no matter what happens. Those forces of human behavior, of our collective hopes and fears, our brilliance and our blunders.
Exactly. And I find that incredibly empowering because if we understand those forces, we're better equipped to navigate them, to make choices that align with our values, to create a future that's a bit brighter even amidst the complexities and challenges.
It's a beautiful way to put it. So, for our listener who has now gained this incredible wealth of knowledge from the One-Hour Guide and our deep dive into Same as Ever, what's the one thing they should walk away remembering above all else?
I think it's this. The world is in constant flux. Technology advances, trends come and go. But the things that truly matter, the things that bring lasting fulfillment, human connection, resilience, purpose, those are the constants. Focus on those. Nurture those. And you'll be able to navigate whatever comes your way.
That's a powerful message to end on, and it perfectly encapsulates the wisdom shared by both Morgan Housel and Sam as Ever and Anil Nathu in his insightful One-Hour Guide. So, to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even a bit of inspiration to apply to your own life.
And if you're hungry for more, we highly recommend checking out both the full book and the guide. There's a wealth of knowledge waiting to be discovered within those pages.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep diving deep.